The Oort Perimeter, Chapter 8. A grayish sphere of energy appeared in the middle of the bridge and immediately vanished, leaving Mike behind. Sarah shimmered into view moments later. "Ah, Admiral. How was the meeting with the Syrians?" asked Sydney. "It was like meeting Count Dracula's pet bats," muttered Mike. "Dracula had pets?" Mike grinned. He then unbuttoned the jacket of his dress uniform as he tried to relax from the day's highly taxing events. "So, how'd things go while I was gone?" he asked. Eric picked up a data pad and gently tossed it to him. "Take a look," he said. Mike's eyes narrowed as he read the report. "Admiral Bofenizer is handling the dressing down as we speak. But I think you may want to interject yourself into this as it was your order that started this mess," said Eric. "And this happened while I was gone?" asked Mike. Eric nodded. "Not 5 minutes after you left the ship." Mike grunted angrily. "They really stepped over the line on this one," he said. "But didn't you tell them they could do anything they needed to conduct their research?" "That was at least my understanding of your orders." "Within reason." "My orders were that they could do whatever they needed to, within reason." "This is not within reason," said Mike angrily. He looked over at Sarah, and said, "Send me over to Command 1. I need to speak with Admiral Bofenizer." "Where specifically would you like to be placed?" asked Sarah. "Wherever he is, preferably." "Understood," she replied. A grayish sphere of energy briefly engulfed Mike and then vanished, leaving nothing behind. Eric sighed. "Well, apparently the Admiral doesn't need us anymore. So I guess we'll just park the ship back at Command 1 and then go back to whatever we were doing before all this." "Well, except for me. I plan to take a nap. A very long nap." Pendleton grinned. "Aye, sir, enjoy yourself." Eric grinned. "I plan to." Alfred looked up as Mike appeared on the carpet in front of his desk. "Hello, sir, what brings you here?" he asked. "Where's Ohm?" asked Mike, a hint of anger in his voice. "Out at Saturn shipyards running post-operation shakedowns." "Why? Are you asking because of the incident earlier near Pluto Station?" Mike nodded. "I'm going to launch his butt out the nearest airlock as soon as I'm done chewing it off," he said angrily. Alfred raised an eyebrow. "Oh? Then I take it you haven't received the updated report yet?" Mike looked curiously at him, and said, "What updated report?" Alfred frowned. "I'll take that as a no. Anyhow, here's the summary of what I've learned about the incident so far. Apparently Dr. Blank, Corbin's assistant, has been going ape-nuts for the past month wanting to test his new sublight drive system and cloaking device against the best in the fleet. Currently, that's your ship. He felt that a live-fire real-world engagement with a crew that thought they were dealing with a hostile enemy invader would provide the best possible testing scenario for the new system. Dr. Corbin disagreed. So when Corbin wasn't looking, Dr. Blank decided to take things into his own hands. The rest you should already know." Mike grunted. "There are times when I hate overzealous scientists," he said. Alfred furrowed his brow in interest. "It's those overzealous scientists who've brought us to where we are today." Mike waved dismissively as he sat down in a chair. "That's not what I meant. Being overzealous and productive is one thing. But doing something that could potentially cause a major incident, and the potential deaths of numerous civilian and fleet personnel, is just unacceptable. Understandably so, but the situation is taken care of. No need to bother yourself with it any further," said Alfred. Mike squinted slightly. "I hope so. Well, anyhow, since I'm here, there's something I need to talk to you about. I'm thinking we may want to start expanding our spying program. Half the galaxy is freaked out and ticked off at us, and I'd like to find out why. I know the so-called official reasons for it, but I feel there's more to this than just a bunch of politicians with their panties in a knot, so we need to find out who started all this and why." "So you think the rabbit hole goes a lot deeper?" "That's just it. I don't know. It may, and it may not. Either way, it can't be an accident that we've suddenly become feared by so many within the galaxy, and recently at that. I also don't like how this just came out of nowhere on us. That part bothers me the most. It's like being blindsided by a truck on a rainy night. Well, from what I understand, our current rate of technological advancement has been significantly higher than any other race in the history of the known galaxy, including the Nine. Well, except maybe the Rasker. So it's possible that our sudden rise from a relatively primitive species to a technological giant in only a few centuries scares the hell out of them. We've spent nearly 5,600 years more or less as savages by their standards, and now we're suddenly technological giants almost overnight. If I were an intelligent, well-educated alien species, I'd be a little freaked out too. Our technological evolution is not typical in the galaxy. Most races like us would require at least another couple millennia to achieve even half the technology we have now, and yet here we are, killing the upgrades like it's child's play. Mike nodded. That makes sense. But then again, we have reasons for why we've made such a meteoric leap in technology. The first is obviously the Brayburn Society. The other is the fact that the Juna decided to stick a couple million tons of starship in our face as soon as we stepped into space, threatening our very existence. Those two facts alone are enough to encourage any race to grow like we have. Alfred shrugged. Threats against one's personal safety have been the greatest driving force for innovation in our history. You either advance or you die. It's that simple. Mike frowned. I wish that wasn't the case. But pitting our little fleet against a huge enemy with seemingly limitless resources is a bit frightening. Well, in time we might become powerful enough to at least make them think twice about harming us. In the meantime, we have to use less direct methods to dissuade them. Mike grunted. Yeah, like making our guns scary enough that nobody wants to mess with us. Alfred shrugged. Probably. Mike smiled. Well, anyways, back to what we were talking about. I think we need to do a bit of nosing around in the galactic community. It's time we figure out who we're dealing with and why they hate us so much. Or, at least why they're making everyone else hate us. So you think it's just one group causing all of this? Mike shrugged. Well, that's just it. I don't know, and I'd like to find out. Especially since this odd hatred of Earth seems a bit sudden and out of place. Not to mention that it's come seemingly out of nowhere, and grown into something so large as to engulf 4 of the 9 ancient races and close to half of the minor races. Having that many races hating you without reason, and wishing for your destruction, is enough to make anyone nervous. Alfred cocked his head curiously. So who do you have in mind for this mission? He asked. When I approached the Syrian delegates, Lars Nordic appeared out of nowhere and confronted them with some very incriminating evidence. But what impressed me the most was that you couldn't tell he was human until you saw his face. His disguise was so perfect that I thought he was one of the alien merchants who frequent the promenade. Yes, I've heard about him as well. He's our top man in the intelligence corps, and an expert on Black Orchid. He's been decorated numerous times for his efforts to keep those lunatics in check. Mike perked up in interest. So you know of him? Likely in the same way you do. His last mission against Black Orchid set them back at least 10 years or more. He was also mentioned by name in 5 of the last 8 major intelligence reports of the past month. Mike was intrigued at this. Do you think I should send him out? He asked. Alfred nodded. I do, as I think he'd make a good choice. But he can't go alone. I understand that, but who would we send with him? Well, I have at least 3 people in mind. Namely, his partner, Vladimir Umnov, as well as Antonio Garcia and Bob Landers. They all come very highly recommended from the Director of Intelligence. Mike was impressed. It sounds like you've been doing your homework. Alfred shrugged. I saw this coming, so I did a little planning ahead. Well done. I look forward to knowing what our neighbors are having for breakfast before the end of the week. Alfred grinned slyly. Would you like a summary, or the whole messy details? Mike laughed. I'd like to be able to eat tomorrow, so just send me the briefs. Alfred laughed. Aye, sir. Lars studied his orders with satisfaction. About time they got around to this. I was starting to get worried that our mission would get scrubbed and we'd be back to babysitting Black Orchid, he muttered. Vlad chuckled. You worry too much. No, I don't. I just didn't want to be stuck here waiting for Black Orchid to move again. That'd be as bad as watching paint dry. Landers laughed. I think Lars is what the Planetsiders call an adrenaline junkie. He lives for the thrill of the chase, he replied. Lars glared at Landers, but said nothing. As he did, an older gentleman walked into the room, drawing everyone's attention. Ah, Director, to what do we owe the honor of your most illustrious presence? Asked Landers with a hint of elegance. The older man grunted, and then handed each of the men a data pad. Cut the bull, Landers. I'm just here to give you your mission briefs. Read and memorize them. You may not have time to reference them later. So who's our ride gonna be this time? Asked Garcia. You'll be splitting up by teams and flying out on the Onagai and the Appalachia. They're scheduled to depart at 0700 hours. So don't be late. 2 ships, sir. That seems a bit much for a mission with only 4 guys. That's because you're going in 2 different directions. Hence the need of 2 separate ships. Plus, I'd feel more comfortable with each of you having your own ship killer out there shadowing you wherever you go. That way if something happens to one of them out there, the other can come to its aid without waiting for backup from home, assuming you're able to get in touch with us if things go south, said the older man. Do we have any grunts to fall back on, or are we just 2-man solos? Asked Lars. You're solos. So no grunts, fleet or droids. It's just you and your partner. And, if you get caught, we don't know you. Remember, this is a deep cover recon op. So don't take any chances. I don't want to hear that you did something stupid and got caught. Just get out there, find out who's behind all this human hating, and get back here as quickly as you can with the information. Got it? The 4 men nodded. Yes, sir, they said in unison. Good, now get your butts out there and get to work. Toby studied the bridge of his ship and admired its state-of-the-art design, and yet brilliant simplicity. He then studied each of the stations in front of him in detail. Sir, Lars Nordic and his partner, Vladimir Umnov, are requesting permission to come aboard, said the operations officer. Well, it's about bloody time. Bring them up, said Toby in a Scottish accent. A grayish sphere of light appeared briefly on the bridge a moment later, and then vanished, leaving Lars and Vlad behind. Permission to come aboard, said Lars. Aye, permission granted. But you two take your sweet time, said Toby. Lars frowned. We have been here sooner, but we got held up by the old man. Toby nodded in understanding. Aye. Been there a few times myself. I'm Lieutenant Commander Tobias. But you can call me Toby, he said, holding out his hand. Lars stared at it briefly, but kept his arms crossed in front of him. How soon can we get underway? Asked Lars. Toby withdrew his hand awkwardly and frowned slightly. Right now, if you wish, he said. I do. The faster we get out of here, the better. Aye, then we'll get underway immediately, said Toby. He then turned to the front of the bridge, and said, Helm, take us out. Aye, sir, came the reply. Toby again turned to Lars, and asked, Did you bring any gear? Yeah, just a couple field bags. We had those sent over at the same time we arrived. They should be in your cargo bay. Toby looked at the operations officer who nodded. Their bags are aboard and awaiting them in the cargo bay as indicated, he said. Good, then we'll take care of those in a little while. In the meantime, gentlemen, if you're interested, you can stay on the bridge and watch our exit. It's quite an adventure. If not, you know the lay of the ship. Lars looked at Toby curiously. Why is this departure any different than the others? Because we're going outside the Oort Perimeter. And? I take it you've never been beyond the perimeter before, said Toby. Lars shook his head. Why would I need to? Most of my missions are either in system or planetside. Ah, then you're missing quite a fun experience. Since we're traveling covertly, we have to sneak through our own defenses. It's not as easy as it might sound. Since those who watch us count every ship that goes in or out of the perimeter, we have to travel under full cloak, concealed within the magnetic field of another ship. If the gate controllers were to open the gate specifically for us, a lot of questions would be asked that Fleet Command would prefer not to answer. So who's going to hide us? Asked Lars. Whoever we pick. Since we're now officially operating in stealth mode for the foreseeable future, we can't exactly ask permission from anybody. Most don't care if we piggyback them on the way out, but on the way back in it's a bit different. Lars shook his head. The offer sounds interesting, but I'll pass. I have research to do before we get to our first destination. You'll have plenty of time for that, sir. We're over 9 days from our first checkpoint. 9 days? I thought you could make that checkpoint in 16 hours. Only if we want to be seen. Moving at that speed would generate a large enough energy trail to light up every long-range sensor in 3 parsecs. Unless we stay below 300 AUM, we risk detection by anybody astute enough to be watching for our ion wake. I thought you had a state-of-the-art cloaking system. We do, but even the best cloaking shields can't hide and dissipate that much of an ion wake. Well, at least not yet. The only way we'll ever be able to travel that fast, and remain fully cloaked, is if someone discovers a way to neutralize the upper-end ion wake produced by our coaxial drives. Lars snorted. Fine. Just get me to our destination. Toby nodded. As you wish, sir. Lars turned and motioned to Vlad to follow him. As the 2 men slipped off the bridge, Toby's chief engineer leaned over his station and smirked. Fun guy, isn't he? He said quietly. Toby snorted. A real piece of work. He'll be fun to babysit for the next several months.